Charlie Kirk's the founder and CEO of Turning Point USA and the author of the new book, The College Scam. So, Charlie, do you accept the View's apology?
I mean, regardless of whether or not I accept it, the question is, do our students accept it? That's really what's at heart here. They went after our 5,000 students at our event there of high school and college kids. And look, I get attacked all the time. People say false things. I'm a public figure. But when you go after 16 and 17-year-olds that travel from across the country that then have to live for the rest of their life with a shadow over them because someone at ABC says that they might be linked to neo.
For years, she was the epitome of unflappable intellect on national television, a legal mind sharp as a razor, a voice of unshakable conviction. Her carefully curated persona, built on years of rigorous academic training and primetime exposure, projected an aura of absolute control. But what if a single invisible force launched from thousands of miles away could shatter that meticulously constructed image in mere moments? What if a seasoned broadcaster, accustomed to the predictable rhythm of live debates, suddenly found herself the unwitting star of a digital horror show, her composure crumbling into a viral spectacle without her even realizing the war had begun? This isn't just the story of a bad day on live TV. It's a chilling, revelatory tale of how the internet redefined public humiliation, transforming a powerful pundit into a symbol of a seismic shift in the media landscape. This wasn't a live debate, it was a remote detonation, a digital ambush that rewrote the rules of media engagement, turning a televised segment into a harrowing case study of modern media warfare.
Her disgusting, gross elitism and her complete out-of-touch nature with respect to the rest of the world. Sunny Hostin goes on The View and decides now would be a great time to dump all over the so-called uneducated.
What we did not have is white women who voted about 52%, right, for Donald Trump. Uneducated white women, is my understanding. You have Latino men, actually, voting more for him. And you have, and black men was not the story. We're not the story here because they voted almost 80% for the vice president.
Right. Just because you didn't go to college doesn't mean you're stupid, and it doesn't mean that you don't have wisdom. You can go to college and get a bunch of irrelevant facts about how men can allegedly give birth or whatever they teach.
The saga ignited with an event that, on its surface, seemed routine. Turning Point USA, Charlie Kirk's rapidly growing conservative organization, held its annual Student Action Summit in Tampa, Florida. This wasn't merely a political conference. It was a phenomenon. Over 5,000 high school and college students, representing the future of the conservative movement, had traveled from every corner of the country, spending their summer savings on flights and hotels, driven by a fervent desire to engage with conservative ideas. It was a remarkable, undeniable display of grassroots enthusiasm and dedication. Yet when the conversation turned to this event, on the hallowed set of The View, the narrative veered into dangerous territory. Sunny Hostin, among others on the panel, made a series of statements implying a direct connection, a complicity between these thousands of young aspiring conservatives and a small group of neo-Nazis who had protested outside the venue. The implication was clear, cutting, and designed to stain that these bright, engaged students, and by extension the conservative movement itself, were somehow aligned with or even embracing extremist ideologies. Imagine being a 16-year-old fueled by patriotism and intellectual curiosity, returning home from an inspiring weekend only to have a national television show viewed by millions cast a literal shadow of neo-Nazism over your life and future. This wasn't just a misstatement, it was a character assassination on a mass scale, aimed directly at the heart of a burgeoning youth movement.
Look, what did it take for us to get to the point of an apology? We had to threaten a lawsuit, Jesse. And by the way, we're still entertaining it. We're talking to some of the best lawyers out there that are experts in this. And as you know, these things can be very complicated. There's a lot of facts and circumstances around it. But we're not going to let this go, because you should not be able to smear 5,000 high school and college kids and then just be able to walk away with it. And the reason they felt they needed to do that, Jesse, is because if they told their audience the truth, that when gas is the most expensive it's been, flights are super expensive, that 5,000 kids decided to spend a weekend in summer traveling across the country to go hear from conservative speakers, maybe the audience of The View would think twice about all of their ideas. That's why they felt so compelled to try to smear our wonderful summit this last week. White privilege is a racist myth that is rooted in bigotry, trying to classify people based on their skin color. If you are a racist, you have something to apologize for. If you're a white person who is not a racist, you have nothing to apologize for. And anyone who makes you apologize just based on the color of their skin, they're the racist and you're not. It's that simple.
Charlie Kirk, the astute founder and CEO of Turning Point USA and a shrewd operator in the new media landscape, wasn't about to let such a profound smear stand. His response was swift, multi-pronged, and strategically brutal. He didn't just express outrage. He immediately demanded a public apology, not as a polite request, but as a non-negotiable ultimatum. More critically, he leveraged the full force of legal threats, openly discussing the potential for a massive multi-million-dollar lawsuit, citing successful precedents like the Covington Catholic School settlement. He made it clear he was assembling a team of the best lawyers out there, signaling that this was no idle threat. But Kirk, understanding the power of digital warfare, didn't stop at legal maneuvers. He launched a prepackaged political grenade directly onto his own platforms. This wasn't a nuanced critique or a polite rebuttal. It was a meticulously edited, overproduced, and overtly smug video. It was a digital demolition, specifically targeting Sunny Hostin's entire ideological framework and perceived elitism, as if her viewpoint owed him money. Every element was carefully considered. Dramatic infographics flashed across the screen, slow zooms lingered on key phrases, and righteous, almost cinematic background music swelled to underscore his every word. This wasn't about winning an argument through reasoned discourse. It was about achieving total digital dominance through manufactured outrage and viral shareability. Subtlety, in Kirk's playbook, was a weakness, not a virtue.
This Turning Point conference, were in the front of out there in front of the conference with anti-Semitic slurs, and
I think it's important that every single person that attended that Turning Point, every Republican speak up against the swastikas, against the flags that were waved.
You let them in.
President, open your
You let them in and you knew what they were.
Right.
So you are complicit.
And the final point I'll say is this, is Sunny, you guys thought that abortion was going to be this like quasi-zealot religious issue. I'm pro-life. If people in the audience aren't, that's fine. What I'm saying though, what gives me promise, and I think we can all agree on this, is that there are other issues that should animate and drive our politics other than this very divisive one. And I was really encouraged by that, Megan. Very encouraged, because the media was forcing this as an up or down vote on a referendum on a highly complicated, very emotional, very personal issue. And it turned out the American people were like, yeah, actually, these other 6 things matter more. And good for them.
The internet, a ravenous beast perpetually hungry for conflict and spectacle, devoured Kirk's digital offensive. His video exploded, spreading like wildfire across every conceivable platform, faster than a fabricated celebrity scandal. Within mere hours, it wasn't just trending on Twitter. It clogged timelines across Facebook, infiltrated Instagram Reels, sparked furious debates in subreddits, and ignited comment sections into veritable battlegrounds. Conservative blogs and niche online forums, usually seen as echo chambers, transformed into amplifiers, pushing the narrative relentlessly. Influencers and content creators, recognizing the viral gold, churned out reaction videos and celebratory posts with titles that screamed Charlie Kirk ends daytime delusion and Sunny Hostin hit with reality brick. This wasn't merely content, it was a meticulously crafted digital weapon designed to generate maximum viral impact and consolidate outrage. And as this digital storm raged, its turbulent currents began to ripple, undeniably, through the fortified walls of traditional media. The View, usually a bastion of rehearsed liberal comfort and controlled discussion, suddenly looked less like a polished talk show and more like a cruise ship caught unexpectedly in a Category 5 hurricane. Everything on set seemed to wobble, the usual buoyant energy dipped, replaced by an underlying tension, and the cameras, those cruel, unblinking truth tellers, began to capture the subtle yet unmistakable signs of Sunny Hostin's composure, visibly, undeniably crumbling.
Welcome back. You know, in Monday's conversation about Turning Point USA, I put the young people at the conference in the same category as the protesters outside. And I don't like it when people make assumptions about me. And it's not any better when I make assumptions about other people, which I did. So, my bad. I'm sorry.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, they have nothing else to talk about. Maybe you should get the lawyer that worked on that Covington Catholic school case. What was that, a $200 million settlement? I think, Charlie, you could use the money, and your students definitely could too.
This wasn't a dramatic outburst. No screaming matches or chair-flipping tantrums worthy of reality television. This was far more brutal, a slow-motion public collapse of composure from a woman who had built her entire career on being unflappable, on possessing an unyielding intellectual and emotional fortitude. Sunny Hostin, the poised pundit with a law degree and a backbone of steel, started visibly short-circuiting in real time. Her usual confident gestures gave way to persistent, almost nervous fidgeting, her hands moving restlessly, her body shifting, subtly in her seat. Her strained smiles barely masked deep discomfort, a desperate attempt to maintain a facade of control. Her voice, typically crisp, commanding, and resonant, began to wobble, losing its usual crispness, sounding like a Jenga tower on its last precarious breath. Her eyes, usually direct and focused, darted repeatedly towards the teleprompter, not for her lines, but seemingly searching for an escape hatch, a secret code to bypass the escalating digital siege she could undoubtedly feel. The atmosphere on set became palpably thick with unspoken tension, a sense that everyone in the room knew something was fundamentally wrong. It was a spectacle so elegantly disastrous, so impressively spontaneous in its unraveling, it almost deserved preservation in an archive of media mishaps. This wasn't a conversation, it was a televised implosion, leaving Hostin visibly shaken, desperate, and utterly scrambling for a comeback that, in the face of this new kind of attack, would simply never arrive.
Look at your achievements. How do you like the so-called uneducated now, Sunny?
Yeah, and again, by the way, rarely do you get the answer to a question in the question. And her whole question is exactly why there was a rebellion against them.
Yes.
Listen, just because you didn't go to college doesn't mean you're stupid, and it doesn't mean that you don't have wisdom. I always differentiate between knowledge and wisdom. You can go to college and get a bunch of irrelevant facts about how men can allegedly give birth or whatever they teach. I mean, it's or about North African lesbian poetry. Okay, that stuff's fine, I guess.
The relentless pressure, amplified by the online deluge and solidified by the concrete threat of legal action, eventually became insurmountable. Charlie Kirk wasn't bluffing about his intentions, so in a stunning, almost reluctant display of capitulation, The View issued a public apology just a short time later. The statement was carefully worded, clarifying that the openly neo-demonstrators were indeed gathered outside the event and were not invited or endorsed by Turning Point USA. They unequivocally stated that TPUSA 100% condemns those ideologies and emphasized that TPUSA security had even actively tried to remove the individuals from public property, but couldn't because they were on public land. Furthermore, The View clarified that it was a TPUSA summit distinct from a broader Republican Party event, apologizing for anything unclear on these points. This wasn't a gesture of goodwill or a spontaneous act of journalistic integrity. It was a strategic retreat, a defensive maneuver driven by the very real and immediate threat of a massive multi-million-dollar lawsuit that could have crippling financial and reputational consequences for ABC and Disney. Kirk's insight into The View's deeper motivation for the smear was chillingly accurate. If their vast audience knew that 5,000 young people would willingly pay exorbitant prices for flights, gas, and event tickets to hear conservative speakers, it might force them to question The View's own deeply entrenched, often unchallenged liberal ideas. The apology, therefore, wasn't about rectifying a factual error out of moral obligation. It was about avoiding a catastrophic financial and public relations disaster.
We begin with a shocking apology just a short time ago from the ladies of The View to Turning Point USA. A war of words broke out after the conservative group was rallying the next generation of voters at its youth summit in Tampa, Florida this weekend. And the liberal panel just couldn't help themselves. The group sent a scathing cease and desist letter after hosts on The View suggested that Turning Point had embraced neo-Nazis who showed up outside the event.
Over the weekend, Turning Point USA hosted a riveting event in Tampa, Florida called the Student Action Summit. Outside of the event were individuals waving flags and engaged in other activities. Well, on Monday's show, members of The View made a few comments about it.
The conservative group Turning Point USA has condemned the group of neo-Nazis and said they have nothing to do with the organization.
Yeah, but where was DeSantis is what I want to know.
But you let them in. You let them in and you knew what they were.
Right.
So you are complicit.
This entire incident served as a stark, brutal lesson, laying bare the profound and often unforgiving reality of the new media landscape. For decades, traditional liberal media, often personified by figures like Sunny Hostin, operated under this comforting, if increasingly naive, assumption that truth will prevail. The ingrained belief was simple: if you stack enough meticulously researched facts, sprinkle some profound legal analysis, and wrap it all in a calm, authoritative voice delivered by someone with a prestigious Ivy League degree, people would nod thoughtfully, absorb the wisdom, and perhaps even change their worldview over a cup of chamomile tea. Spoiler alert, they won't. Not in 2024, not when the modern audience instinctively scrolls past nuanced economic policy breakdowns in favor of incendiary videos titled "Liberal Melts Down after getting destroyed by common sense" in all caps and 5 exclamation points. The rules of engagement have fundamentally changed, irrevocably. Audiences no longer crave nuance. They demand spectacle. They want the political version of WWE, body slams, trash talk, and folding chairs flying across the ideological ring. Debating used to be about who possessed the most coherent, logically airtight argument. Now it's solely about who can craft the most potent, most viral, most click-worthy moment. If your opponent manages to morph your public image into a 10-second meme, scored with sad violin music, you've already lost, no matter how impeccably airtight your constitutional interpretation might be. Charlie Kirk didn't arrive armed with a dossier of facts. He rolled in with a digital wrecking ball, a perfectly calibrated algorithm-fueled weapon, and the most unsettling part? He achieved this public humiliation from a different building, possibly a different zip code, through sheer, unadulterated online willpower. Hostin, meanwhile, was left literally sitting in the rubble of her own credibility, blinking like someone who had just realized their carefully curated, impressive resume offers absolutely no immunity against a viral meme. The damage to Sunny Hostin's public image proved to be far-reaching, arguably permanent, at least within the unforgiving expanse of the digital realm. That pivotal broadcast clip didn't just exist as a moment, it instantly evolved into an entire digital ecosystem. TikTok edits proliferated, YouTube breakdowns dissected her every micro-expression, Instagram Reels amplified her discomfort with exaggerated emojis, and reaction videos by influencers, many of whom probably think Karl Marx is a TikTok dance, soared in popularity. It was remixed more times than a chart-topping Drake single, stripped of context and repurposed for maximum comedic or outrage value. Her carefully constructed poise shattered into 1,000 algorithm-friendly pieces, each one being shared, stitched, and monetized by anonymous accounts and aspiring content creators. For years, she had meticulously built a persona of intellectual clarity, moral confidence, and professional gravitas. But in the brutal glare of the internet, none of that mattered when the collective digital hive mind decided to turn her into this week's piñata. It wasn't even that her point of view was factually incorrect or inherently flawed. It was that the ensuing spectacle, the visual evidence of her unraveling, made her look unprepared, shaken, and crucially human. And being visibly human, especially when facing a digital onslaught on live television, is now practically a career death wish. Charlie Kirk didn't win because he was smarter or more factually correct. He won because he was spectacularly brutal. In his execution, and the internet in its rawest form rewards blood. So here lies Sunny Hostin's media reputation, slightly singed and deeply memed. A once seemingly untouchable voice, now tragically trapped in an endless loop of her own blinking eyes, broadcast repeatedly by the very platform she and indeed much of traditional media fundamentally underestimated. Her public breakdown wasn't loud, it wasn't angry, it wasn't even performative in the traditional sense. It was worse. It was real. And in this gladiatorial digital arena, where the audience is not here for justice or thoughtful discourse, but rather for blood, popcorn, and whatever content goes instantly viral before lunch, Hostin was caught unprepared. Charlie Kirk, the master of smug insurgency, already basking in the glow of his digital throne, has undoubtedly moved on to the next target. And Sunny, she will likely recover, perhaps even rebuild her standing with traditional audiences. But the internet, that vast, unforgiving digital ledger, never truly forgets. And when you're not ready to be a part of the circus, when you bring a constitution to a meme war, it will find you anyway, turning even the most poised figures into unwilling, unwitting poster children for public digital unraveling.